if you intend to have a short-term rental for 100% of its investment life, you're nuts.
I only know one person who's ever actually met Snoop Dogg in person, and he was at a wedding for this dude who was loaded out of his mind, and Snoop Dogg was performing. But you happen to have met Snoop Dogg yourself, so like, talk to me about that.
Sure, I had a music development company. This was early 2000. I think this was like 2001 or two, something like that.
So I was like 19 and an idiot, and you're meeting world famous people.
20. Well, I don't know how old I was, but yeah. Anyway, so we had a band we were working with. They were invited to do Farm Club, which was Interscope's. This was like the first streamed live music venue. I mean, this is 2000, right? And so Interscope Records had the means to launch this at this time, and they had huge artists. So our band was invited to be on the show. So it ended up being Jimmy Iovine's birthday, and they, along with this show, they were doing a celebration for him, and so performing that night was NWA with Snoop Dogg stepping in for Eazy-E.
Wow.
Yeah, so Dre was there, everyone was there, and there were a lot of celebrities there. It was just sort of ended up being a really big event, and one of those things where like, how the hell did I end up here, right? So I'm talking to an industry friend, and Snoop comes over and starts talking to him because they know each other. And then my industry friend says, "Oh, I got to go talk to this guy over here." So now it's me and Snoop just standing there, standing across from each other, looking at each other. And there's not a lot of people. We're like in the backstage area. There's not a lot. So he just, pulls out this cigar-shaped
object
and says, "Hey, man, you want to, what are you doing right now?" So I'm like, oh my God, this is like, I'm actually going to smoke one of Snoop's blunts with Snoop. Is this actually happening? And it did. And then I hear over my right shoulder, "Hey guys, can I join in?" And it was Quentin Tarantino, who that surprised me. And then Fred Durst comes up and joins. And so it's Fred Durst on my left. I'm facing Snoop. Quentin's on my right. And that's what happened.
That's what happened.
It was wild.
I feel like LA used to be such a cool place to be, right? Like you see all these films recently depicting kind of LA in like the 70s and 80s and 90s, where it was like this crazy magical place where like all this stuff was happening. And, obviously you have these like cults and these cliques and these hangers on and, people going to these like insane house parties and whatnot. And it was like super cool. Now it just seems so sad. Like the freeway caught on fire last week. Like it's just so, and I'm sure there's some magic still happening, but man, like what a weird place it is now.
Agreed. I moved there in 97, and I think I was 26, and so it was a very different place. I went there. I started my own music company. I was kind of free to do whatever I wanted. I was in New York City at the time. And when I went there, it just was this paradise. I remember I was deciding whether to move there or not. And there was like, I'm standing on my friend's porch in Laguna Beach, looking at the ocean, pondering this question, and like a school of dolphins, jump by. And it's like, okay, I mean, if I can't take a sign from the universe. So we moved there, and it was fun. It was everything we wanted. It was beautiful. The weather was great. But as we being my wife and I, as we matured, it just like, well, first of all, California changed, but so did we, and it's just not, it's not a place it's not the same place for me. So it's fallen apart. And you drive through downtown LA and it's like Beirut in the 80s. I mean, the streets are torn up. Like There's people, living in boxes. It's crazy. It's crazy.
This podcast is brought to you by Legacy Life Memories, the premier video autobiographical production company for you and your aging loved ones. Legacy Life Memories helps preserve memories of a lifetime in high-quality video that can be shared with every generation to come. Visit LegacyLifeMemories.com and find out how they can help your family today. Did you see any of those videos about San Francisco when Xi Jinping swung by? It was about a week ago.
Mm-mm.
Oh my God, so magical. So literally there were several videos that depicted, the motorcade coming through San Francisco. And first off, streets are immaculate, absolutely immaculate. Chinese flags everywhere, right? It's amazing. And then that cuts to this press conference of Newsom. You haven't seen this?
I'm not a news watcher.
No, neither am I. Somebody just sent it to me, but there was a press conference of Newsom saying, God, I'm going to bastardize it. He's like, some people say that we cleaned up everything just because this important guy came. And they are right. He says, and that's true because it's true.
Folks say, they're just cleaning up this place because all those fancy leaders are coming into town. That's true because it's true.
There's a quote from a brilliant thinker named Forrest Gump who said, "Stupid is as stupid does," something to that effect.
All right, listen. When in '97, I was a young kid, right? I was in high school. I wasn't paying attention to a lot, but you being in LA, kind of the epicenter of chaos in California, what drove you out of that area? And again, you can say everybody talks about the world changing, right? But obviously you were successful, you moved out of the music industry eventually and moved into real estate, right?
Yeah.
And you were crushing in real estate, is my understanding. And so you were doing fine. I think a lot of people get these golden handcuffs and they just don't want to leave. They're like, I'd have to start all. I have a dear friend, for instance. He's an attorney. He's very successful, employment attorney in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area. And he's like, listen, if I moved, I'd have to redo all this stuff. And he doesn't like the area. He's like, but I'm not gonna. And it's just this golden handcuff. It's kind of like, okay, Jeff, what's your life worth? Right? Essentially you're saying I'm getting paid enough so that I will live in an area that I don't like around people I don't really care for just because I'm getting paid. It's like, okay, so your number's 300,000 or 400,000. This is how much you sign away your actual daily life for. Right? So what happened for you that drove you away from monetary and career success and, an area where you see dolphins diving and stuff? What was that?
First of all, there was an opportunity presented to me for a job. It was probably the best job on paper that I'd ever been offered. And I was also, so I was 41 or 42 when I moved up to the Bay Area from LA. And I needed a change. And a big one. And so change is hard. I am the type that when I'm feeling this way, I tear it apart. I call it re-engineering. I tear it apart and I kind of start over. And not to the nth degree, but to an effect. I just needed to leave, right? And an opportunity was presented to me and I said yes. And so we went up there. I worked for Greystar. The opportunity was with Greystar, which is I believe they're the largest property management company on the planet. And there was a $750 million portfolio that they just acquired, and I was, kind of running that whole thing. It ended up being a really corporate job, really corporate. Kyle, am I a corporate guy? No, I'm not a corporate guy. In fact, I am a horribly uncorporate guy. I'm sort of an HR nightmare.
I believe that. I believe you.
I have no filter. Kyle can attest to this. Whatever pops up into my head, I try my best to say it eloquently, but it often just comes out because I just feel like when I need to say something, I holding it in is worse than whatever could come out. That's
Sure,
just my thing.
And up until that point, you had been self-employed, right? Like it was
No,
your-
no.
So you had the music production company.
and that was I closed that in 2001.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that was a long time ago. So from 2001 until 2015, I was in corporate America working for large companies that bought or managed apartment complexes. So, and during that journey, I became an asset manager where I worked for the actual owners and then managed the property management companies. And we were literally flipping 300 unit buildings. And that was, I learned a lot. In my corporate experience. I'm grateful for everything that I learned because I got a seriously good education on how all that works. My soul was slipping away. So the longer I was in that system, the more of my soul was being taken away. And frankly, my son was born in 2015, and I pictured him asking me, "Daddy, what do you do, and why do you do it?" And my answer, when I was at Greystar, is, "Well, I manage these big apartment communities. I hate it, and I'm miserable, but they pay me well. And that way I can take care of you." And I just is not the message I wanted to give my son.
Do you remember that movie American Beauty, back when it was okay to like Kevin Spacey?
Yeah. It's a great movie.
It's a great movie. I was actually thinking about it just the other day, but his depiction of himself and his employment, he's like, I'm a whore for corporate America, like all of these things. I remember my mom talking about that too. She worked as an accountant for Aetna in the accounting department. And there was the first time she was very critical of Aetna and her employment there. She didn't like working for corporate America either. And she's like, I prostitute myself. I'm like, you're using that word a lot, like more liberally than I think you really should, Mom.
It feels like that, you know. And there's another good scene in Fight Club where he exits the company by beating himself up and blaming on, and it's like, that's the thing. You will do just about anything. You'll do crazy things to either stay in it or get out of it. It's a weird prison. It was for me, at least.
I've never had a job, so I don't know. Like, actually, I did. Okay, I had a brief stint of employment at Applebee's for 2 months. This is not great career opportunity there. And when I was like 18, I worked at Abercrombie and Fitch for a month.
Ooh.
When I was 19 in college, the Christmas months. And you just reek of like the Abercrombie, and like I have Mariah Carey just seared into my brain. And then the last one was I worked as a tutor at Berkeley when I was going to school there. I started tutoring the other students. I worked at the tutoring center, would tutor them in math or writing or whatever. But the second I graduated from college, I started my education company, and I never worked for anyone again. Then after the education company, when I moved here, I've started other things, and it's kind of like, people talk about the corporate world, and it's always this like, it's kind of like hearing somebody talk about Narnia, but like a really bad Narnia. Mm-hmm. Like it's this different world that like where animals talk and like up is down and down is up and like everything
Bizarro
is
world.
Yeah, exactly. Cause it's kind of like, I've always lived in a world of competence and meritocracy, right? Like, cause if you're self-employed, and you're attempting to exchange a service or a goods or something from an individual consumer who has the money you want and you have what they want, like, yeah, maybe you can swindle one or two people, but after a long enough period of time, it's like the world figures you out. It's kind of like, look, is this person delivering something valuable to me or are they not? Yeah. And in the corporate world, I've heard that's just not that way. Like there's no escaping it. It's just not that way.
Yeah, it's most people are in, I don't know if it's most people. I don't know what the percentage of our population works in corporate, but it's a big number, right? A lot of people work for a large company. And it's for them, it's fine. Right. A lot of people are built that way. I don't want to insult it, but it's like it works for them. They're happy. They have security. They know how much their next check is going to be and when they're going to get it, right? And
and they just kind of function in the bureaucratic system.
Yeah.
Right. There's that scene.
They
in
thrive even.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, if you don't, I was talking to another entrepreneur the other day, this woman, Pam, who's great. And she does reverse mortgages and all kinds of stuff. I'll put her information in. She's dynamite. I've worked with her on several different projects, and she's fantastic. But we were talking about the nature of being an entrepreneur, because she's doing a lot of different projects, and most days are like these hot messes of just insanity. Like, you're trying to handle lava with your bare hands. It's just like, oh, everything you're doing just doesn't seem to be working. And the excitement, I had a project that I was working on, and the excitement that I got out of just the possibility that the project would work was like all I needed to keep going. It's like, don't give me a guarantee. Don't tell me that I'm going to get paid. Just tell me there's a chance this might work. And that's enough for me. And again, juxtapose that to somebody who's like, okay, I know what my paycheck is going to be. And like, maybe it's not that exciting, but like, I'm going to, my pension will be paid and my 401k will be funded. And
yeah, so the first person is they get off on the journey, right? It's the journey to the goal, and you've heard that a million times. Sure. It's cliche, but it's true. You just described it. I identify with that, because for me, like building the company, these early days where Kyle and I, our belts are as tight as can be. We're figuring out how we're gonna get through the quarter. That's where the fun and in the moment you're in the killing fields, right? There are bullets whizzing by. But once you get through that battle, it's exhilarating, right? And so that's the journey. If we were a $10 million company tomorrow and there wasn't much for me to do, I would be miserable. Yeah. I'm not saying I don't want to. We have goals.
I'm not saying I don't want to be 10 million, but
we have financial goals, and,
right.
and we plan to achieve them. It's just that for other people, they want to show up and know I'm going to get paid on the 1st and the 15th, and this is how much I'm going to get, and I'm happy. And they're built differently.
Yeah. The fight, the killing fields. Like, I have had, all right, I went into tutoring when I was 22. And after that, it was like, yeah, the first few years, you're trying to figure it out. But like after, I think I was 22, and then by 27, 28, it's like, dude, I've seen every problem 1,000 times. I've heard every parent complaint or concern or criticism 1,000, because parents complain all the time. Like, I don't see my kid. One of the classic complaints that I appreciated was like, I don't see my kid getting better. And it's like, that's interesting. Like, are you testing him? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, well, what's the metric by which you're judging his success? Because I'm seeing his homework, and his homework is improving in quality. So like, anyway, so you know how to address people. And so reinventing things at 39 and 40, it's like back into the heat of it. What you're saying resonates so clearly. It's like this series of these tiny little battles that you get thrown into, you don't see coming, and then you're just, it's like a dog fight, and you get better and you're more successful and more competent and able to deal with them. But it is a battle. Like, it is. You're like slaying these beasts that pop up that you didn't anticipate. It is such a beautiful, exhilarating thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The journey.
Let me ask you something. You're managing, at some point, you moved to the Bay Area, you're managing this portfolio that's $750 million. There is a lot of criticism of larger investment portfolios and large investment companies that are acquiring single family homes and other properties to start renting them, right? And they have been blamed for driving up the cost of housing in the United States. Well, at least I've read articles where people are it's BlackRock is the reason the properties jumped up 20%. I'm like, I don't think BlackRock's the reason.
I'm nodding my head because I'm wondering if I agree with that.
I don't. I'll say right away, I don't agree with that, because even if BlackRock acquired 15% of the properties, the other 85 are acquired by other people, and the value of the dollar is changing. We have housing scarcity. Like, yeah, they purchased some. They didn't even purchase close to the majority of them. And like, maybe they drove up the price 1%, or I wouldn't even say it's 1%. It's like 0.5% or something. But the point is, I don't blame them. I view them as like, the only reason they're acquiring them is because there's a need for rental housing.
Mm-hmm. Well, right? And they've identified, first of all, property management has been dismissed as like a secondary real estate business for decades, and the only real property management players were apartment complex, corporate. I mean,
Right.
you know, that has been the game for a long time. What people are finding especially just before COVID and certainly through COVID, is property management and single family homes is an excellent business. And one of the interesting things is pre-COVID, about 80, they think about 80.
Do me a solid. Drop this down just a little bit. Yeah, pull it down. There you go. So you were saying single family homes and here's something. A lot of people like I was told when I got into investing that single family homes were like the Cadillac of investing, right? They're like, listen, you're not connected to anyone. You don't have to deal with cranky neighbors. You have this discrete asset that you can buy and sell very easily. You can refinance it easily. You get the most favorable loans. But people, for some reason, want like every time you hear anything, was it like Grant Cardone? Like he's like, anything under 13 units, you're giving back to the bank. It's like, what are you talking about?
What he's talking about, and I think one of the cons with the single family home is that when somebody moves out, you have 0% revenue, right?
Right.
You have $0 in
You have
revenue.
100% vacancy.
100% vacancy, right? If you have a 13 unit building and one person moves out, it's 8% or whatever. And so that is, especially from an investor's point of view, that's a big difference. But
that's like that isn't that disingenuous, don't you? Okay, in my experience in dealing with single family home rental, all right, you're not like, first off, if you manage it appropriately, you have a vacancy coming up 90 days from now. Okay, well then you start getting somebody lined up now, as long as it's not disrupting the actual tenant. And some people are like, hey, I don't want anybody coming in here while I'm living here. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But you can, first off, you can screen tenants and be like, hey, would it be all right if when you guys are moving out, if I start showing it about 60 days out? Most people say, yeah, that's not a big deal. And hey, you could be here if you want or not, or I'll take people through, whatever.
Yeah.
So in my experience with single family homes, let's say in Berkeley, right, renting to college students, I have pretty much zero vacancy. Like somebody moves out May 31st, next group's moving in June 1st. That's like, if you plan it appropriately, you don't have this horrendous vacancy. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I think sort of. So depending on where you are, if we're right next to BSU or Berkeley, yeah, that works. If you're a little bit outside of that and you're just you have a single family home in Meridian.
Yeah, sure.
People, what I found, it's harder to rent when somebody else is in the property. They want to see a blank canvas. They want to imagine what their stuff looks like, and they're not somebody else's. It smells funny because of how they're still in there. It's might not be presentable to our standard. I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong. And when somebody isn't motivated, like, I have to find a place next to Berkeley or BSU now. Like, I don't care what it looks like. I just need to secure a place. That's very different than what it is for everyone else. So yes, it works sometimes. A lot of times it doesn't. And in fact, we see a lot of objections because of the people that are in there and their stuff. And
interesting.
Yeah. So
interesting. Yeah. And again, I think you're absolutely right. A lot of my experience
can go either way. We try it. We do, we try everything. And we certainly want to have something on the market as soon as possible and let people know about it. But it doesn't always, it's a very hard thing to do I think it's hard to lease when there's an existing tenant in there. It's just, but
it's a struggle.
It's not impossible.
Gotcha. Okay, so back to the single family verse 14. So I understand. Oh, whoa, watch out! I understand the concern of distribution of rental loss, right? So instead of having 100% vacancy or 100% occupied, you have like, hey, look, I'm usually, if I got say I got 10 units and one moves out, I'm 90% occupied, right? And then you go back to 100 or whatever. So I understand that, but. Well, what do you think about that? Do you think that's a valid reason to focus on larger complexes, Or do you think there's benefit to having, lower density properties?
I think it depends on your situation. People who are buying multifamily properties have deeper pockets. They have more cash to outlay, and they have a different plan. We have a large sector, a large percentage of our clients are what we call accidental landlords. They have a property. They never intended it to be a rental, and now they're in some situation where it has to be a rental. A good chunk of those people right now have 3% mortgages, and you'd be absolutely nuts to get rid of that asset. Anyone out there that has a 3% mortgage or less, if you ever get rid of it, you've just gotten rid of the best asset you'll ever have, period.
Right.
And so what do you rent it, right? They have to move somewhere else, but they shouldn't get rid of that property. So, it's just another situation. They've outgrown the property. They're moving to McCall, but they don't want to sell it. They want to keep it in the family. And man, there's a lot of those out there. And so, that's a very different mindset than the intentional investor that's saying, I want to buy single family homes, but I want to buy 30 in the next 5 years. Can you guys help us do that? We can, we will. For us, that's generally a very fun client to work with. We're aligned with them usually in our mindset. We're looking out for them. We're helping them find these deals. We're delivering top quality service so they have to worry about it and they can focus on their investment plan.
Sure.
I like to say you guys can sit on the beach sipping fruity drinks all day. We got you. So yeah, it depends, right?
Depends.
Yeah,
it just depends. Talk to me about managing like Airbnbs. Do you guys do any of that?
No.
Okay. Why? Because
it's a completely different business. It's
I know.
The hotel industry.
Right. So here's the thing. People get into I see so many people rushing into Airbnbs, right? And they're like, yeah, look, I just bought this property. It's only going to make sense if we Airbnb it, and we have to have a certain amount of occupancy and all these different things. It's like you are going into like one of the most risky business models I've ever seen in my entire life. And they're getting, sometimes they get debt service ratio loans, to make the property work, like all kinds of different things where it's like you're not even in the rental housing business. You're in a like bed and breakfast. Like you're saying, you're in the hotel industry. Mm-hmm. And people get into it all the time. And it blows me. They're like, it just blows my mind. Have you had any experience with people that are coming out of it? Because I think overwhelmingly what you have is people jump into it. They try to make it work. They realize the unbelievable taxing nature of the industry. And then they're like, okay, I need to long-term this. And now I've purchased it. So I'm going to end up, probably taking a loss a little bit. But what do people report when they're getting out of it and they come to you guys to look for help with management?
Yeah. So first of all, that's a very good business for certain strategies and at certain times. If you intend to have a short-term rental for 100% of its investment life, you're nuts. You should diversify it to what's happening in the market. So with that said, first quarter of this year, 2023, oh man, like 3 out of 5 of the people we were talking to were getting out of short-term because it was dead. Right. It fell off the cliff. We were hearing stories of, I've had one booking in the last month, and that's where that's where that investment plan goes south. It's not always going to be 2020 to 2021 where it was, you could have the junkiest Airbnb in town and you're renting it because there was so much activity here. So many people wanted to check out Treasure Valley, and those places were booked solid. And then it stopped. And people panicked. These houses were sitting for months, and all that profit started to slip away. So that's our experience. Is it's great when it's great, and it's easy when it's easy, but. Most of the time, it's not like that. Most of the time, you really have to It's got to be part of a well-planned strategy. My partner Kyle and I have talked about, should we have a department that does short-term, because we can, if we have both departments, we can make that suggestion. Hey, like right now, rents are dropping. And if Airbnbs were popular, we might suggest, let's, make this an Airbnb for 6 months and then switch back. And if we have that flexibility, I just think that could, from my perspective, that's the advantage of having that department, is that we have a larger umbrella of services for our clients. But it is a completely different business. I mean, the only thing we share is the vendors, right? But those are even different vendors. They have to be responsive today.
Like hyper responsive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like a cleaning crew that actually comes exactly at 4:30. Like you can't come at noon, and you can't just miss today. Like you really have to be reliable and on point.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll probably keep kicking it around. But yeah, we like to stay in our wheelhouse, in our lane, which is property management, residential property management.
Right.
That's what we do.
I think a lot of the mom and pop property managers, and again, accidental landlords, right? I have this property, especially in the last 18 months, as values started to come down. You saw a lot of people who might have needed to move for whatever reason, and they realized, like, shoot, I bought my house, let's say 3 years ago. Now I'm a year and a half in, and the equity has actually decreased significantly, right? Let's say 10%. Okay. And they didn't put that much money in. Let's say they put 10 or 15 or even 20% in. They're like, if I sell it now, I'm down 10% on the equity, plus I'm going to have to pay at least 7% to get out. Like, I might actually have to come out of pocket to finalize this deal and get rid of this house. They're like, the better answer would be rent it for a period of time. I'll get my principal reduction along the way. Yeah, I'm going to have to rent it, but I got to leave the state, right? Or I just don't know how to really do the management. A lot of the amateur property managers, and that's not putting people down, but they don't really know how to market it properly. They don't know what the assets are.
Yeah.
A lot of those people, I think, find themselves in tricky positions where they don't know how to get the most out of their property, and they're looking for top dollar. Like, how do you work with those people? Because a lot of times they don't want to pay for management, but they can't do the management themselves. They also don't know how to market it, but they don't want to pay somebody to market it. Like, is your experience with these people is just like, look, this is what we can do for you guys. This is how we're going to do. Like, you help them understand the value of professional management. I had a horror story with a relative. Person had a condo, very, very nice place, but they didn't want to pay for a property manager. Now, this individual was actually a professional, right? She was working in professional fields and busy and had kids and everything. And so she ends up putting this for rent sign in the window, and months go by. Then a pipe leak happens in the property, ends up costing them some ungodly, like $100,000 to repair all this stuff, because the only way they find out about it is because the HOA is like, hey, there's something going on with your unit. We got the number off of the for rent sign in the window that's been there for months. A horrific thing, right? Because they didn't want to pay they didn't want to pay for the management.
Yeah,
how do you navigate those people that really need professional management but just don't understand the value that you guys are bringing and don't understand what they don't know?
Yeah, we try to educate them. It's hard. People are coming with their own opinions, and so the way we see that is, look, this is why we have a whole, really, we can talk on individual issues, and I can tell you why, or show you why having a property manager would have been a better situation. But sometimes you just have to learn the hard way.
Right.
And, we do our best to educate. I will say that it is almost a fact that if you have a property manager, how do I want to say this? Your net revenue with a property manager will be greater than without over time. And that is a fact. Why? Vacancy. You hit on a bunch of these things. Sitting vacant for months. I mean, that erases all profit for that year, all cash flow, gone. I mean, no matter what you do. An issue that pops up that's not addressed quickly can be, we just had one ended up being $30,000 because of a slow leak behind a fridge that had somebody been doing inspections, we would have at least known about this a little bit sooner and maybe prevented some of this damage. I mean, so all those things, and then if people, and this can be frustrating. People get hung up on, I want $2,500. I need $2,500 rent on this property that's worth $2,000. Like, they are way off in their mind, and they're thinking it's 2021. The rents are not that high as they were. So. And they get stuck on, a better example is, I want to stick at $2,300. I know you're saying $2,100. Okay, so for $200 a month, they're holding out for $200 more a month. They're losing $70 a day holding out for that $200 a month.
Right.
And sometimes that's very hard and frustrating to communicate, because I see that so clearly, and they are so hung up on the short term and how I need another $150 to pay my mortgage. I mean, if you don't have another $150 to pay your mortgage, you probably should not be in property management. You shouldn't be you shouldn't be a landlord, right?
Right. Because if you're hung up on $200 a month, excuse me, you're hung up on $2,400 a year. Okay. And if you're looking at $2,300 versus $2,100, if this property sits vacant for another 3 or 4 weeks, that wipes out any benefit you would have gotten.
Gone.
Right. And so you have to recoup that loss of vacancy. That person has to be there for at least 12 to 24 months if you're assuming a higher vacancy because you wanted a higher rent. They might also have expectations that are greater than what your property is really going to be able to produce. There are all kinds of problems that come with really, really sticking out for the last possible dollar. Mm-hmm. And I think most people just don't recognize that they're going into that. Right? They're like, no, I just want more money.
They're stuck on that short term. Like, no, I need to pay my mortgage this month. Can you have this rented by tomorrow? Because I need the rent the day after tomorrow. And it's like, you're not ready for this. This is not how it works. I have these accidental landlords call when there's, any kind of maintenance issue. What could have possibly happened? Well, what do you mean? Your house was built in 1980. What do you mean? What happened? This things, there are maintenance items, so setting these expectations, like 10% of your rent is going to go to maintenance, on average, 5 to 10%. Expect that. Expect maintenance expenses. Expect times of vacancy where we have to re-rent it and you're not getting revenue. Like, if you're not ready for this, you shouldn't do it.
Okay, let me ask you then, in your opinion, how do you communicate with people that it's worth to go through this pain? Because a lot of people see, especially with a single family home, they get so hung up on like the $200 a month rent that they're trying to get, that $200 extra that they're trying to get. What do you communicate them is the actual business model that they should be focusing on?
You hold this for another year, what's your house going to be worth? Around here, it's even with all the losses this year, all the backwards momentum that people are talking about. And by the way, it's not as bad as the media presents it to be here in Treasure Valley. Here. It's pretty
yeah, any media source that says, hey, even the entire state of Idaho is the same is a total lie.
Right. My house we bought in 2020, we had a huge appreciation in 21, and then it fell back, but we're still way ahead of where we were. And that's the big picture. So, and that's only 3 years, a 3-year period. There was this little roller coaster ride, and we're good. I would say to that residential homeowner, look at the big picture. If you want to hold this, you can't lose with appreciation, with the appreciation of your house. Don't get hung up on the $100 garbage disposal repairs, your house is appreciating by hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next few years, right? Like, that's the big picture.
Right. And an old landlord friend of mine told me when I was like 23, 24, just getting into the business, and I didn't really understand what the business was. And I, again, was getting hung up on like, oh, maybe I can make like $100 or $200. And he was like, you're not. Like, first off, if you're net positive 200, like you're still net negative 300 because you're going to have all these expenses over the long run. Right?
Yeah, who cares? I mean,
right. Like
cash flowing $200. Who cares? What? That's not the game.
Right. But that's the point. Like, I didn't understand the game. He's like, listen, the real way to make money, and this was his strategy, right? Totally fine. He's like, the real way to make money as an average investor is to get something and to hold it for a long time. And he's like, because then you're going to make money in capital gains. And he was even saying, I think at the time he had like $20,000 net positive. And he's like, look, half of that's gone immediately. I was like, what? How could it be gone? Like, how is that even possible? He's like, listen, I got property taxes I got to pay. I got insurance. I got all of these different things. And he actually owned his properties outright by this point. He was kind of older. And he's like, even with the $20,000, he's like, I got to pay all these things. And then it gets ground down to like $7,000. He's like, I make $7,000 a month. And he was, single guy living alone and didn't have a lot of expenses. So he lived a fine life and everything. But again, his emphasis is it's not the cash flow that matters. It's the fact that I bought the property for $50,000 and 20 years later, it's worth $500. He's like, so if you amortize that, like how much money would you have to be making in cash flow to even come close to matching the $450,000 capital gain you got? That's the game, right? And that's a big piece. People apply the cap rate and cash flow paradigm from like the 20 and 30 and 40 unit complexes down to the single family home. It's like, this is a different game. Oh, it's just a different business completely.
I have to say, I get really annoyed when people start talking about cap rates for single family home. I'm just like, okay, it is. I appreciate their their gumption, right, with how they're thinking of it as an investment. But a cap rate, it has no bearing on a single family home. It's not how it's valued. It's not how you do your pro forma. It's got very little to do with it. When you're talking about, I guess even 2 doors or more, you could start talking about it. But it only matters for 5 doors or more, because those are the buildings that actually value. You can. You're doing your pro forma, you're forecasting your plan, and with a cap rate, you can understand what your exit plan is with a building like that, not with a single family home. Yeah. So,
talk to me about Eagle and Meridian, 2 of the hottest areas in the Treasure Valley that people want to live. Great school districts, great public services, great opportunities. Okay, talk to me about the rental market in these 2 areas right now. You were saying the rents are not quite what they were. Are they softer in like the 3,000 and below range? Are they soft across the board? Like, what's your experience there?
Well, first of all, in 2021, the average rent for those 2 homes you described was around $3,000, a month. Today, it's more like $2,100. So a 30% drop. That's a big. I mean, when you say 3,000 to 2,100, that actually resonates more than saying, oh, it's fallen by 30%. That's a lot of rent.
That's a big drop.
Yeah. It's a correction. Part of it is a correction. They were inflated. they shot up. I haven't seen anything like that in a long time. How much rents went up between 2019 and 2021 here, it was astounding. So there was a correction, and that's good and healthy. It's not realistic to expect 100% rent increases and then for it to all, it's a roller coaster.
Right. But you're still net positive considerably versus 2018 to 2021. It's like, you went up 100% and then you dropped 30, but you're still, if you bought at the 100% mark, that's rough. But, anybody who had something beforehand, still up considerably.
Yeah. And I when I say 100%, I had clients that said, we had this rental in 2018 was 800 and now it's 1,800. That's more than 100%. So very interesting market. It's coming back, and then of course now it's seasonality. It's winter. It's holiday season. Things slow down substantially. What we have found, though, this is interesting. It's I don't know if it's an anomaly year or what's going on, but rents are very competitive. So that means that they're not going up.
There's downward pressure.
There's downward pressure, and so you have that seasonality, you have that downward pressure. Once you hit the price point, we are finding that there is huge demand. So we're at 2,200, not much is happening. We lower to 2,100 because that's where we run the comps. We see things are closer to that. Very price conscious rental market. So if you're even $100 off, they're going to go to your neighbor's house and look at that one. So once we hit that price point, our phones ring off the hook right now. And so that's unusual for November, late November, early December.
And that's literally at $100 price difference.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. So essentially that's indicating that there are people that do want to move, but they're just constrained by...
There's huge demand. Any media that's saying demand is softening, that's nonsense. There's huge demand to live here. People still are coming here. There's still a sense of exodus from the big city to a better way of life. That is definitely a thing still. Yeah.
Man, it's beautiful. It is a better way of life too.
Yeah.
I love it here.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely fantastic. Why did you move here? Because I mean, obviously you're kicking around California, Southern California, Northern California. I lived in Northern California my entire life and, actually lived within like a 5-mile radius my whole life. I grew up in Concord, this like real lower end kind of middle class spot. I ended up going to Berkeley. It's about 10 miles away. And then I moved back like a triangle, right? Like back to this place, Danville, out of Oakland and Berkeley. Lived in Danville. And then from Danville, I moved here. Mm-hmm. That's it. So like I lived in this little tiny area. For me, there were all kinds of problems. Like you were saying, it's like, it just became a different place overnight. And I actually knew I was doing podcasts in 2020 with the people running for city council of Danville, right? Town council. These were good people that recognized there was this massive change, but their hands were tied. Like the state was requiring that they build a certain number of units. The state was requiring that they do all kinds of things with affordable housing. And here are people like, wait a minute, we don't have that much space. I mean, Danville is very often compared to Eagle by the people that moved from Northern California, except Danville in a little valley really had no space. Like they had nowhere else that they could build. They didn't have these massive lots that were just sitting around, right? There's a lot of rolling hills even within the town and stuff. They're like, where are we going to build these places? So it changed considerably. The attitude of the people changed. But like, what drove you to this area?
Great question. 2019, I realized I wanted out of California. I had a property management company there and that I'd built. I started it in 2015. By 2019, it was pretty successful. And then, but I'd gone through a DRE audit. There were fires happening. PG&E was turning off the electricity for 5 days as I'm trying to operate a business.
God, I remember this stuff. Oh, it's terrible.
And it just seemed like one. And then our son was about to go into kindergarten, and the only option was a public school because charters, private schools all had these waiting lists that we were far down on the list on for whatever reason. I didn't even understand that. There was like a lottery system. I didn't understand how that worked. And I was just, I was over it. So we started talking, and good friend of mine told me, you should go into Boise. You should check it out. We did. I absolutely fell in love quickly. And also I fell in love with, I researched what would it take to start a property management company here. And wow, was I pleasantly surprised at how easy they make things here to the bureaucracy is, you've seen it. It's night and day. It's the opposite.
Right.
What takes 4 months and $500 to do, in California costs $25 and takes 3 days here for starting a business.
Right.
It's just completely different. So
you can get an assumed business name from the Secretary of State in like 2 hours. Right. Like you fill out a form. It's like, this is the business I'm in, boom, boom, boom. And then they're like, all right, you got to get a hold of the county or the city you're in. And these are the different agencies you got to talk. Like they tell you everything. It's the most streamlined, wild process ever. And then you email directly with like the county. You're like, hey, county, I'm running a podcast. And they're like, oh, awesome. Like, yeah, that's it. Like, thanks for letting us know.
Yeah. Can you just make sure you let us know every year?
Right.
That's all we ask. Yeah.
Right.
I can do that.
So easy to get a business going here.
Yeah, it is. And so we decided to put our property management company up for sale, and took about a year, but I was able to get a great deal, what I wanted. I had 4 offers at the end of the day. I didn't have a broker. I decided to do this on my own. I'm not sure I would do that again. Selling a business is not easy, but we did it. And then we put our house up for sale. It sold in a week and a half in 2020. And we literally were like, okay, we should probably fly to Idaho and find a place, because we just sold our house and our business. And so that's kind of how it happened. We found a house in Eagle we love. And we were lucky to get it. And just the whole, I'm a universal energy guy, and like everything was pointing to aligning with this decision and saying, this is right. This is right.
Yeah.
Just once we made the decision and put our focus and hearts into it, it happened pretty gracefully.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard that from people too. Once people make the decision, things just snowball. They go real fast. And it's great. Like, I haven't regretted moving here for a second. Similar kind of thing. My wife actually had never even been to Idaho before we moved in, right? Like, I flew up here about 2 years ago, and I met with my buddy Mike and his wife Christina, who's a realtor up here, and I was like, listen, I'm not leaving without a house. And so like we found a house in Dry Creek Ranch, and that was it. And then I flew home, 48 hours later, and packed up, and 6 weeks later we were in the car moving here. I think our house sold in like 10 days. It was wild.
Yeah.
But then it was like 2022, it was February. It was like the absolute peak of the market, just the fever. Yeah, man, it's awesome here.
It is awesome here. And then finally the schools.
Oh, schools are so great.
Yeah, and the expense of everything. I mean, it's crazy. Our house is, we moved out of a 2,600 square foot house.
Man, you were living large in California. Yeah. I was in 1,700 square feet.
Yeah. And I was in Morgan Hill, so a little
there you go.
further south.
Yeah, right.
And 3,000 square foot house here for 60% of what we sold our house for. I mean, it just was like, this is ridiculously awesome.
Right.
It
You
just
have an
worked.
actual backyard.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. It's awesome, man. Well, listen, true to form, we're already past an hour.
Okay.
We crushed it. Listen, first of many, I really enjoy talking to you, and I want to hear more regularly about the rental market. I want to understand what you guys are seeing, because
Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do this more often, because again, I think other people too wanting to get into the rental market up here. I know a lot of people move here, they have extra equity. They want to start, they feel that the, investing in property would be a good idea, and having a good resource and having people understand, who they can talk to about actual rents, like boots on the ground knowledge is a valuable thing.
And we can get into some of the things that are differentiators that really help investors. And I'll just mention one really quickly as an example of cool things to talk about. We can advance 12 months of rent to our investors. So before the rent is ever collected, we can advance $25,000, $30,000 to them. If they have an urgent roof issue today, they don't have the cash. If their car blows up and they need to get a new car, if they want to sail around the world, it doesn't matter what they use this money for. We can do things like that. And so we're very aligned with the goals of especially our real estate investors, the people that want to advance what they're doing and take some risks and pass that risk on to others like us and third parties. I think it's really cool, some of the things that we're offering to help investors advance.
Let me get this right. Say I'm renting a property with you and the property is $2,500 a month. I can come to you and say, hey, Chapin, I would like $30,000 in advanced rent right now. And you're like, sure, Matt, here you go.
Yeah.
Man, that's wild.
And you know that there's some details to that, you know. But yeah, that's the idea. And that same program offers 2 months of lost rent. So if somebody skips, a skip is when somebody just moves out without notice, sure. Their lease hasn't ended, or they're evicted or something, and there's lost rent. There's basically insurance for that. So I don't know. There's some, you know, for the person that we were talking about earlier that's hung up on, oh, I need to cash flow. These are other things in place that will help you cash flow. It may not help you right now today, but working with KeyRenter, you've got some additional tools. You've got advisors. You've even got programs where you can get cash fronted to you. So pretty cool stuff.
Super cool, man. Yeah, I've been in real estate for a long time. I've never heard of somebody doing that. So that's definitely differentiation. Good stuff.
Time for, another time.
Another time. Listen, we're gonna keep this conversation going. Thank you for coming today. Thanks for dropping some wisdom and knowledge and information about the area.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Sorry for my hard P's.
You're fantastic. We just moved the mic a little bit away. It was perfect. Anyway, you're the best. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate you.
Thank you, brother.
This podcast is brought to you by Legacy Life Memories, the premier video autobiographical production company for you and your aging loved ones. Legacy Life Memories helps preserve memories of a lifetime in high-quality video that can be shared with every generation to come. Visit LegacyLifeMemories.com and find out how they can help your family today.